Hi everyone, I'm Carrie,
I'm Alan.
and this is episode 1 of the Age Gap Love Story podcast. Yay! And the first video on the Age Gap Love Story YouTube channel. We are actually going to be posting our podcast on our YouTube channel. So whether you're listening or you're watching, we're so happy to have you here. And we are just getting used to all the technical stuff, so please forgive us. We only have one mic right now. We have one on the way, so sorry, you're micless today. We're just going to pass it back and forth. And so you'll forgive us, please, if we make mistakes. We're just getting used to this. We've never really done anything like this together before. But what we wanted to do in today's episode is to tell you a little bit about us. We're going to tell you what you hopefully will learn from us and topics that we're going to cover, and then overall, basically how to make your age gap relationship successful. You can probably see from the video, if you're watching, that we do have an age difference. It's pretty significant. And do you want to tell everyone a little bit about us?
Yes, I'm never going to give you back the microphone. The bottom line is that we're a married couple. We knew each other and actually were quite close for 5 years before we were married. The journey from there to here, which has been 17 years of marriage and 22 years of a close relationship, has been one where we have learned many things about each other and about how to deal with our age differences. In some ways, they've been very minor. In other ways, they've been somewhat major. There are issues you do have to deal with that we're going to cover in a series of episodes during this podcast. And they're practical, both from an emotional, social, and financial perspective. And we hope they'll be a benefit to you. So from that standpoint, we hope you continue watching and share our experiences and see how they perhaps relate to you in an existing relationship or one that may be ahead of you if you have an opportunity to find a soulmate, as the two of us have, and each other, with someone in your life. So with that, I will turn the microphone reluctantly back to Carrie.
Yes, Alan is a little bit of a ham, so I would say that we're both introverts, but Alan is more of a jokester and silly and funny, which is actually probably one of the main reasons I fell in love with him. And I am more of I don't want to say practical because he's very practical. We're both really practical, but I'm more of the introverted, introspective kind of person. But we definitely do believe that we're soulmates, and we're so lucky to have found each other when we did. And I think in the next episode, actually, we're going to go much deeper into who we are and our background, and then our love story. But today we just mainly wanted to give you a brief overview of who we are. Again, we're Carrie and Alan, and we're a married couple. We have 32.5-year age difference. And we decided to start Age Gap Love Story because we really wanted to connect with other people and help other people. And especially people who are either thinking about this type of relationship or are already in an age gap relationship with someone who's either younger or older. So we really don't want to make any assumptions about who you are. You could be the younger partner, you could be the older partner, but we're not going to make any assumptions. And these types of relationships come in all different flavors, so to speak. They're, of course, women with women and men with men, and younger women and older men, and younger men and older women. So whatever type of relationship you're in, you are welcome here, and we're so happy to have you. We want to get to know you and connect with you. Did you want to say something?
I would like to say something.
Okay.
One of the reasons we were motivated to do this podcast is to help others, as we mentioned earlier, who may be in a similar situation and perhaps don't quite know all the ins and outs of it. Not that we do, but we know some of them. An example is a much older gentleman, a friend actually of my older brother's, several years ago asked me about the relationship that Carrie and I had because after his wife passed away, after a couple of years, he evidently met a lady who was several years younger than he. I don't remember the exact number, but maybe 15 or 20 years younger. And they became quite good friends before any romance developed. And he wanted to pursue a romance, but he was literally petrified of how his children would react in such a situation. And he asked me how I dealt with that because I do have two lovely adult children, in fact, two grandchildren. And in discussing my circumstance with him and how I dealt with that and overcame that issue and was able to adapt in a family environment to my new circumstance with Carrie, he decided to pursue a romantic relationship with this lady who was a friend of his. As it turned out, the way he introduced it to his adult children was well received. Their mother had passed away. They understood that their father was alone and needed companionship, and this lady happened to be very much in love with their father. And so it all worked out well. And that's not to say that every circumstance will be like that, but had I not given him the courage to pursue it, he wouldn't be a happy man, which he is today. So I'll pass the mic back to Carrie reluctantly.
So, in addition to just giving you this overview of who we are, and again, we'll go deeper into that in the next episode, we wanted to tell you a little bit about what we think that you can learn from us. And we have notes, by the way, so we're trying to keep ourselves on track. And so what we think that you can learn from us and learn from this podcast is essentially that there are some unique challenges that come with relationships that have an age difference. We're going to assume of about 10 years or more. I think that when you get into actually generational age difference, which is more about 20 years, then those differences are even more significant. But again, like about 10 years is about the age difference where some of these issues can come up. And so we want to address those challenges and talk about how we've navigated them. At some point, we would love to interview experts. I don't know if we're up for that technical challenge yet, but we would love to do that. And I also will tell you in a little while how you can connect with us, because podcasts are not great for interaction. So we have some other ways. And then, of course, if you're watching the YouTube video, please leave a comment so we can connect. And so in addition to those unique challenges that we want to address, we want to bring in our experiences. Obviously, our experience colors everything that we'll be talking about. And then kind of what Alan talked about, having a friend in an age gap relationship or who was thinking about one, Alan was able to advise him. So we want to share experiences from our friends. We don't know a ton of age gap couples, but we do know a few, and it's been very interesting to observe. One in particular I'm thinking about, they ended up having children. Alan and I don't have children, which is, of course, is a topic we'll go into in much larger detail in the future. And then lastly, overall, like why you should listen is I think we want to help build this community and help make you and us feel like our relationship is normal. It's nothing weird. It's nothing to be ashamed about. It's nothing to hide from, which is all emotions that I felt in the beginning of our relationship. And I think we'll talk more about that next time, but I had a lot of angst, a lot.
May I give our audience just a quick overview of some of the topics we're going to discuss?
Yes, please.
If you'll forgive me, I'm going to reference our note because I did give a lot of thought, as well as Carrie, to some of the thoughts that we put together. Because I come from a business background, thinking about it from a sales perspective, and please don't rush to make a judgment on this, but in sales, if you want to develop business, you usually have to find a prospect. And usually it starts out there's a suspect, and then you have to qualify that suspect before they're really a prospect. And then, of course, you want to convert that prospect to a customer. So thinking along those business terms, again, if you'll forgive me for that analogy, when you meet someone, there's a process to qualify them. Are they serious? Do they have issues or baggage, if I can use that term, or problems? I mean, these are things you have to know before you really get serious, before you introduce them perhaps even to family and friends. There are other things we have to plan for the future, such as financial considerations. Prenuptial agreements are usually an integral part of this. And then, will you have a sound financial future? Or are you the earning partner and the other partner is not? And how do you balance that relationship? And are there commitments to a previous spouse and children as far as child support and alimony? And how do you deal with that? And is it covered? There are other things such as health insurance, long-term care insurance, and providing for the possibility of having children in the second marriage, which can be a very thorny issue, particularly if there's a big age gap. Other factors are, once you've made some of these decisions and you're very comfortable with the possibility of the relationship going forward and becoming something really solid, then you can address it with friends and family. And how do you do that? Those are just some of the topics. And Carrie's tearing the microphone away from me now.
No, I'm just pushing it closer to your mouth.
She's pushing it. I get a lot of advice from Carrie, if you haven't noticed, actually. Also, how do you deal with strangers and judgments? And I can give you thoughts on that. When we've gone out together, we've had some very interesting experiences. And as far as like your life circumstance, are one of you still working? Is one of you retired? And how do you deal with that when one person is maybe not available for most of the day? And fear of being alone when that older partner dies. Of course, I never plan on dying, so it's not an issue for us. But just one little anecdotal comment as far as what it's like in public. When you're a big age gap couple. When Carrie and I were on our honeymoon, which was a cruise, and as you probably know, on cruises, there are a lot of tours depending upon the port that you're in. On one occasion, we were on a large tour bus, and there were these two older gentlemen sitting in front of us, and Carrie and I were just sitting there holding hands, or my arm may have been around Carrie, and they kept one at a time turning over their shoulders and looking at us. I could tell they were quite old because I could hear as they turned their heads, and they kept muttering between each other. And I said, "Hi, how are you guys today? Have any questions?" And one old guy looked at me and said, "Is that your daughter or your girlfriend?" I said, "Neither." I said, "It's my wife." He went, "Oh," and then talked to his friend for another 30 minutes without turning around. There are other experiences I'll be happy to share with you, but that was one of the more interesting ones. I think that they wouldn't look at us for the rest of the tour because I don't know why. Maybe they were afraid they would get interested and run off with the younger women because their wives were up in front of the bus.
Okay, so Alan covered a lot of the topics that we want to address. I would say one that you missed would be the differences in life stages. And actually, when Alan and I were dating, I did see a therapist because, as I mentioned, I had a lot of angst, and didn't know if I should move forward with him. I mean, it was like I knew we had this connection, and I really enjoyed being with him, but I just didn't see how it was going to work. And at that time, I did think that I would have children someday, and Alan wasn't too keen on restarting that process. As he mentioned, he has two children who are a few years older than me, and two grandchildren. So
the grandchildren are not older than Carrie.
That's true. So this differences in life stages I want to talk about because especially with a large age gap, I was in graduate school, or I started graduate school pretty soon after we started dating, maybe a year into our relationship. And so I was really starting out my career, and Alan was more in the, I won't want to say the end stages, but maybe past the midpoint of his career. And Alan is now semi-retired, and I am more of, I'm very, very busy with my businesses. So we'll talk about that and maybe give you some input on how to make that work for your situation. So I think those are the main topics that we wanted to talk about. We'll go into much bigger detail. The two other topics that we wanted to talk about today would be if you're considering whether or not to subscribe to the channel or the podcast. I want to maybe give you some maybe some input about who you might be and things like that. And then we're going to just maybe wrap up the community aspect and how we're going to build that. So I just want to maybe say that this channel or this podcast would be really appropriate for you if you are in an age gap relationship or you're considering one. And we, of course, want to say that we would assume that you're both parties are the legal age of consent. And also, as I mentioned, we make no assumptions about your gender or your type of relationship you're in, whether it's, you're two women, two men, or whatever. But we do assume also that you're an open-minded person and you have good intentions with your partner. And then we also just want to make a note that we are not offering any type of professional advice. And of course, we do research on everything we talk about, but we're not, this is not like in place of legal advice or financial advice or a professional therapist, anything like that.
Yes, and on that point, I do want to emphasize that we're not therapists. We're not in any way qualified to provide the type of advice that a therapist or somebody who specializes in this as a career would offer. However, we have been there. We have lived this. We have done it. And from that standpoint, we may be able to provide you practical information on actually how to get through it, not just from a social, emotional, but also from a financial and planning and lifestyle basis. So again, that's why we're doing this. And we really hope that we can help some people develop positive relationships or improve upon relationships and come out on the other side of all the effort as happy people.
Yeah, I mean, if you are if you met your soulmate and you have an age gap, I mean, I've absolutely no regrets about moving forward in my relationship with Alan. We are true soulmates. We love each other so much. Of course, when we're recording this, we're in the middle of the pandemic, and we've been together day in and day out, even more so these last few months, and I can't think of anyone else who I could spend this much time with and not strangle them.
Yeah, and it has had absolutely, you can hold the mic, had absolutely no impact on our personalities.
Okay, so to wrap up, I want to tell you a little bit about some of the community ways, or the ways that we hope to build community. So I have created a Facebook group, and it is at Age Gap Love Story, and I would love for you to join. I believe it is a closed group. So they're just, I think, 2 or 3 questions that you need to answer to request to be in the group. And I will look at that probably every day. And I would love for you to join that group because I find Facebook groups to be a great way to connect. So you can do that. There's also a Facebook page, which you can feel free to like, and that's where I'll be posting links to the new episodes and the new videos. I also have created an Instagram account, and it is called Age Gap Love Story. So if you hadn't gathered, all the social media are Age Gap Love Story. That's the handle. Those are the handles, Age Gap Love Story. And then, of course, we have this podcast. We have the YouTube channel. And I have also started an email list. So the email list is simply for us to be able to notify you when there are new episodes out. And I will link everything in the show notes. either on the podcast or in the description of the YouTube video. And we really hope that you enjoyed listening. We really hope to connect with you. We can't wait to develop this podcast in this age gap love story. And Alan wants to say one last thing.
Yes. And I do want to emphasize, we would love to hear from you. Please give us comments, give us questions. If there's a particular topic that you'd like to have us address, if we can address it, we will intelligently, well, it's never stopped me before, but if we can address it, we will. So do communicate with us. Don't be fearful. We would certainly love to know what you're thinking and how we can be of help to you if possible.
So that's it for the first episode.
Hooray!
Yeah. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.